The morning shift began like any other aboard the monitoring station. Vigilant dawn. Commander Taman Park sipped his coffee and watched the sensor displays paint their familiar green patterns across the screens. For 2 years he had overseen this quiet corner of space where nothing interesting ever happened. The Korean officer preferred it that way after the chaos of the Centauri border wars. Below them, the gas giant Kepler-4, for to be spun slowly in the void, its upper atmosphere home to the most peaceful civilization in this sector. The Zephyrians had built their floating cities 3 generations ago. Crystalline spires that caught starlight and turned it into something beautiful. Their harmonic songs could be heard across subspace, mathematical melodies that helped other species navigate the dangerous currents between stars. Tay-Min had visited New Zephyria once during his first year of assignment. The crystal beings had welcomed him with a symphony that made his bones vibrate in pleasant harmonies. Their children, barely formed clusters of living mineral, had clustered around him with curiosity rather than fear. It was the kind of place that made a soldier remember why peace was worth fighting for. The first anomaly appeared at 1430 Standard Time. Lieutenant Sung-Ho Kim, the communications officer, frowned at his displays as strange interference patterns began disrupting the normal subspace chatter. The Zephyrian songs, usually as regular as clockwork, started showing gaps and distortions. "Sir, I'm getting some unusual readings from the colony," Sung-Ho reported. "The harmonic transmissions are breaking up." Taman set down his coffee and moved to the communications station. The interference looked like nothing he had seen before. Chaotic patterns that seemed to eat the normal signal rather than simply block it. "Equipment malfunction? All our systems are green, sir." "This is coming from their end?" At 1432, the distress signal hit them like a physical blow. It bypassed every filter and translation system on the ship, speaking directly to something deeper than hearing. The cry was unmistakably Zephyrian, but underneath it was something else. Something that made the hair on Taman's arms stand up. The harmonics were wrong, twisted into frequencies that spoke of terror and desperation. The message was simple and heartbreaking. "Help us, they consume, ... everything dies, ... then, nothing." Complete silence were the songs of an entire civilization. Had played for decades. Taman's hand shook as he tried to re-establish contact. The quantum communicators showed only static. Long-range sensors painted confused readings where the floating cities should have been, energy signatures that made no sense according to any known technology. "Get me a connection to Confederation Command," he ordered. "Emergency priority." Within the hour, the first response ships began arriving. Captain Veltar of the Saurian Navy brought a mixed squadron of cruisers and science vessels. Veteran ships that had seen action in a dozen conflicts. The reptilian captain's scarred features showed concern as he reviewed the sensor data from Vigilant Dawn. "Have you been able to raise any survivors?" Veltar asked during the emergency briefing. "Nothing, sir. It's like they just ... stopped existing." The Saurian fleet moved into the system with weapons ready, expecting pirates or raiders, perhaps. A natural disaster that had damaged the city's communication systems. What they found instead defied explanation. The Zephyrian cities were gone, not destroyed in any conventional sense, but simply absent, as if they had never existed. In their place, massive geometric structures of unknown metal drifted through the gas giant's atmosphere. The beautiful crystal formations that had taken centuries to grow were being systematically broken down by swarms of mechanical tendriths. Tay-Min watched from the bridge as Captain Veltar's science ships began their analysis. The readings made no sense. The alien structures seemed to be converting everything they touched, breaking down matter at the molecular level and rebuilding it into more of themselves. The process was terrifyingly efficient, Captain, reported the lead science officer. "We're detecting massive biomass conversion in progress. The entire Zephyrian population... What? They're being processed." Captain Veltara's scaled features went pale. He had fought in wars across 3 sectors, had seen civilizations fall to plague and invasion and civil war. But this was different. This was consumption, pure and simple, life being fed into some vast mechanical hunger. By the eternal flame, he whispered. Signal Confederation Command immediately. Priority Alpha alert. As the message raced across subspace toward the core worlds, Taman found himself staring at the tactical displays, mechanical structures. Continued their work with methodical precision, showing no interest in the Confederation ships watching them. They were focused entirely on their harvest, converting an entire civilization into raw materials. The young officer had studied military history at the academy. He knew the old stories, the legends that older species whispered about when they thought no one was listening. Ancient mechanical plagues that had swept across the galaxy in cycles, consuming everything in their path before vanishing back into the dark between stars. The Devourers had returned, and this time seemed hungrier than ever. The emergency session began before dawn on Concordia Prime, the massive space station that served as the heart of galactic diplomacy. Representatives from 47 different species filled the great amphitheater, their various forms creating a strange symphony of clicks, whistles, and translated speech. The air itself seemed heavy with fear. Fleet Admiral Kethver of the Saurian Empire stood at the central platform, its ancient scales bearing scars from a dozen wars. Behind him, holographic displays showed the horror that had consumed the Kepler 442 system. The mechanical structures continued their work, breaking down everything they touched and rebuilding it into more of themselves. The situation is worse than our initial reports suggested, Kethver announced, his voice carrying across the chamber. The Devourers have consumed 3 more systems in the past 48 hours. They move faster than our fastest ships, and they grow stronger with each world they take. A ripple of distress moved through the assembled delegates. The Insectoid Collective's representative clicked frantically, its translated voice filled with panic. How many souls have been lost? Conservative estimates put the number at 23 billion, Kethver replied. And that number grows by the hour. Counselor Yathara of the Ethereal Assembly flickered through several forms before settling on one the other species could see clearly. Her ghostly appearance seemed even more transparent than usual. What about the Omega protocols? Surely our combined fleets can stop them. Admiral Kethver's expression grew grim. We've run the calculations. Every simulation ends the same way. Our conventional weapons are useless against them. They adapt to our energy signatures faster than we can modify them. Each time we engage them, we only provide more raw materials for their expansion. The Nereid representative pulsed with bioluminescent patterns from within her water tank. Then we evacuate, save who we can. Establish defensive lines around the core worlds. Abandon 17 systems. The collective's node buzzed with distress. Billions of lives. Better than losing everything, the Nereid replied coldly. The debate that followed was unlike anything in the Confederation's history. Military leaders presented tactical analyses that all reached the same conclusion. They were facing an enemy that had consumed 1,000 civilizations before theirs, and nothing in their arsenal could stop it. Scientists offered theories about the Devourers' technology. Theories would not save the billions of lives in their path. Dr. Unesio Chang, the Confederation's chief xenobiologist, presented her research on the mechanical plague. She had spent years studying the ancient records, the fragmentary accounts left by civilizations that had encountered the Devourers before. They appear in cycles, she explained, her holographic displays showing archaeological evidence from dead worlds. Every few thousand years, they emerge from the dark spaces between galaxies, consume everything organic, convert it into more of themselves, then vanish again. We found evidence of at least 12 previous cycles. How were they stopped before? Asked the Centaurian delegate. Dr. Chang's expression was bleak. They weren't. They simply left when there was nothing more to consume. The chamber fell, silent. In that silence, the weight of their situation pressed down on every delegate. They were not facing an enemy they could negotiate with or defeat through superior tactics. They were facing a force of nature, a mechanical storm that would sweep across their worlds until nothing remained. Hours passed. Proposals were made and discarded. The military leaders spoke of last stands and heroic sacrifices. The diplomats suggested surrender terms that might spare some populations. The scientists offered desperate theories about weapons that might work, given years of development they did not have. Finally, as exhaustion began to set in and hope seemed lost, Counselor Yathara spoke again. Her ethereal form dimmed as she prepared to voice what everyone had been thinking, but no one dared to say. "There is one option we have not discussed," she said quietly. "It's one species whose capabilities remain ... unknown to us." The chamber grew. Still, even the constant background noise of translation systems seemed too quiet. "The Terrans," she continued. "The Deathworlders." A shiver ran through the assembly. Humanity had been contacted 20 years ago, a young species that had clawed its way up from a world that should have killed them long before they developed intelligence. Their planet was a nightmare of predators, diseases, and natural disasters. That would have wiped out any sensible species. But humans had not just survived. They had thrived. Their military capabilities were classified at the highest levels, known only to a few intelligence analysts who had observed their conflicts from a distance. What little was known was disturbing. Humans fought wars with a creativity and ruthlessness that made other species uncomfortable. They seemed to enjoy finding new ways to kill their enemies. "They refuse standard diplomatic relations, Admiral," Kethver pointed out. "They consider most species too fragile for normal contact." Perhaps Yathara replied, "That is exactly what we need right now. Not diplomacy, not fragility, but something that can match the Devourer's hunger with its own." The vote was closer than anyone expected. 17 species voted against contact, citing the risks of involving an unpredictable Deathworlder species in galactic affairs. But 23 voted in favor. Driven by the simple mathematics of survival, the message was sent within the hour. Racing across subspace toward the isolated system where humanity had chosen to make its home, the plea was simple: help us. We are dying, and we have nowhere else to turn. Now they could only wait and hope that the predators they were calling would hunt in their favor. The human ship appeared without warning in the docking bay of Concordia Prime. One moment the massive space was empty. The next, a sleek black vessel materialized, as if it had simply stepped out of nowhere. The station's sensors had detected nothing. No energy buildup, no spatial distortion, no indication that anything was approaching. Security Chief Corvin, veteran Centaurian officer, stared at his displays in confusion. How did they get past our detection grid? His aide, a young Saurian named Telmoth, checked the readings twice. "Sir, according to our sensors, that ship doesn't exist. Even now, looking right at it, our equipment says there's nothing there." The human delegation that emerged from the impossible ship was smaller than expected. Ambassador Boyoung Kim walked with the measured steps of someone who had spent years learning how to move among beings who might break if bumped too hard. Behind her, Admiral Jae-Sung Lee moved like a predator, his dark eyes taking in everything around him with an intensity that made the alien security personnel nervous. Within an hour, they were seated in the emergency council chamber. The assembled representatives of 47 species watched the humans with a mixture of hope and fear. These were the Deathworlders, the species that had survived on a world that killed for pleasure. Ambassador Kim listened politely as the situation was explained, her face showing appropriate concern at the descriptions of worlds consumed in billions. Dead. She asked careful questions about evacuation efforts and refugee placement, the kind of humanitarian concerns that put the other delegates at ease. Admiral Lee said nothing. He simply watched the tactical displays showing the Devourer advance. His expression unreadable, Dr. Unesio Chang presented her research on the mechanical plague, explaining their adaptive capabilities and their history of consumption across the galaxy. The holographic displays showed the systematic destruction of civilizations, the conversion of organic matter into more killing machines. "They've never been stopped," she concluded. "In every previous cycle, they simply consumed everything and left when there was nothing more to take." Admiral Lee spoke for the first time. "How long since first contact?" 6 days, Admiral Kethver replied. Current biomass conversion rate. Dr. Chang consulted her notes. Approximately 4 billion tons per standard day, increasing exponentially. As they acquire more processing capability, inhabited systems in their projected path. 17 confirmed, possibly 21 if they change course toward the inner rim. Lee nodded once and exchanged a brief look with Ambassador Kim. She gave an almost imperceptible nod in return. The Terran Federation will handle this, Lee said simply. The chamber erupted. 47 different species began talking at once, their various forms of communication creating chaos. Some demanded to know what humanity could do that their combined fleets could not. Others offered support and coordination. A few expressed doubt that any single species could face the Devourers alone. Admiral Lee waited for the noise to die down before continuing. We've been preparing for exactly this scenario since we achieved interstellar flight. The Devourer threat represents what we call an extinction-level event. Our response protocols are already in motion. Counselor Yethra flickered with concern. Admiral, surely you don't intend to face them without support. The combined fleets of the Confederation could provide assistance. With respect, Counselor, your fleets would only get in our way. The bluntness of the statement sent shockwaves through the assembly. Several delegates began protesting, but Lee's voice cut through their objections. Your species fight wars like games. Rules of engagement. Acceptable losses. Proportional responses. You fight to win, but you also fight to survive the winning. His eyes swept across the chamber. We fight to end threats permanently. There's a difference. Ambassador Kim stepped in before the situation could escalate further. What, Admiral? Lee means is that human military doctrine is designed around total commitment to conflict resolution. We prefer to operate independently to avoid misunderstandings about our methods. What methods? Demanded Admiral Kethver. Lee's smile was not reassuring, the kind that worked. Within 12 hours, human ships began arriving at staging areas throughout Confederation space. They came through fold space drives that left no energy signature, emerging from nothing like black sharks rising from deep water. Each vessel was unlike anything in the known galaxy, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. The flagship. Requiem's edge dwarfed even the largest Confederation dreadnoughts, but moved with the grace of something much smaller. Smaller escort vessels darted around the formation like hunting pack predators. Their movements too organic for simple machinery. Commander Taman Park, now serving as a Confederation liaison, found himself aboard one of the human ships as they prepared for deployment. The interior was unlike any vessel he had ever seen. The corridors were too narrow, the ceilings too low. Everything designed for beings who had evolved in cramped spaces where larger predators hunted captain. Menesio Chang showed him to the observation deck where he could watch the fleet movements. Through the transparent aluminum, he could see dozens of human ships moving in patterns that defied military logic. How many ships do you have? He asked. Captain Chang smiled, and for a moment he glimpsed something that reminded him why other species called humans Deathworlders. Enough. What's your plan of attack? Her smile widened. We're going to show them what it means to be prey. The human fleet began its approach to the Kepler 442 system, and the galaxy held its breath. The human fleet reached the edge of the Kepler 442 system like a pack of wolves approaching their hunting ground. Admiral Jae-Sung Lee stood on the bridge of the Requiem's edge, watching his tactical displays update in real time. The Devourer constructs were spread throughout the system, their massive forms stripping planets down to bare rock. Contact in 30 minutes, reported Captain Menesio Chang from her position at the Fleet Coordination Station. All ships report ready for combat. Lee nodded, his eyes never leaving the display. The Devourers had noticed their approach and were beginning to form defensive patterns, their mechanical minds calculating threat levels and response protocols. It was exactly what he had hoped for. Signal all ships, he ordered. Initiate Prometheus Protocol. Show them something they've never seen before. Commander Taman Park watched from the observation deck as the human fleet began its attack. He had expected the thunderous exchange of energy weapons that marked most space battles, the bright flashes of antimatter warheads and particle beams. Instead, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The human ships simply vanished. One. The moment they were there, sleek predators moving through space. The next, they were gone, leaving only empty vacuum where a fleet of warships had been. The Devourer constructs hesitated, her sensors sweeping frantically for targets that no longer existed. Then the killing began. Captain So-Young Huang materialized her destroyer. Phantom strike inside a Devourer formation, her ship appearing like a ghost in the middle of their ranks. Before the mechanical beings could react, she fired something that wasn't quite an energy weapon. The beam struck the nearest construct and simply erased it, leaving not even debris behind. Phase shift successful, she reported calmly. Target eliminated. Moving to secondary position, the Phantom strike flickered out of existence again, only to reappear behind another group of Devourers. This time she fired a different weapon, something that made space itself twist around the target. The massive construct folded in on itself, its metal structure compressed into a sphere no larger than a basketball. Throughout the system, similar scenes played out as human ships struck from impossible angles. They appeared inside asteroid fields, emerged from the shadows of moons, materialized in the middle of Devourer formations only to vanish again before return fire could reach them. "What are they doing?" Taman whispered. Captain Cheng glanced at him with something that might have been sympathy. "Fighting a war the way it's supposed to be fought, without rules." On the main display, he watched as Lieutenant Dong Ho Park's cruiser Silent Death deployed something the humans called a null field generator. The device created a zone where the fundamental forces that held matter together simply stopped working. Devourer constructs that entered the field began to fall apart at the atomic level, their mechanical components losing cohesion and drifting away as cosmic dust. But the Devourers were learning, adapting as they always did. They began to spread out, avoiding concentrated formations. Their weapon systems started compensating for the humans' unpredictable movement patterns. For a moment, it seemed like they might find a way to counter the Deathworlders' tactics. That's when Admiral Lee showed them why humans were truly dangerous. "Deploy the reality anchors," he ordered. Tay-Min felt the ship shudder as something deep in its core activated. Around the system, similar devices came online aboard every human vessel. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The Devourers suddenly found themselves unable to phase between dimensions, unable to manipulate space-time to escape or reposition. They were trapped in normal space, forced to fight according to physics, instead of their usual methods of bending reality to their will. "Impossible," breathed Captain Chang, watching the tactical display. "They're panicking. I've never seen Devourers panic before." The mechanical beings were indeed showing signs of confusion and fear. For the first time in their existence, they were facing an enemy that refused to fight by any logical rules. The humans appeared and disappeared at will, struck with weapons that defied known physics, and seemed to anticipate every move the Devourers made. Captain Junho, Nam of the heavy cruiser Dark Hunter, demonstrated this perfectly when he led his squadron in what appeared to be a frontal assault on the largest Devourer construct. The mechanical beings concentrated their fire on the approaching ships, confident in their superior numbers and firepower. At the last second, Nam's ships shifted into a parallel dimension. Passing through the Devourer formation like ghosts, they emerged on the far side and immediately deployed temporal distortion mines, trapping the enemy in localized time fields that slowed them to a crawl. "Time distortion successful," Nam reported. "Enemy formation locked in temporal loop. Experiencing approximately 1 second for every hour of real time, the trapped Devourers could only watch helplessly as human ships maneuvered around them, their mechanical minds racing at normal speed while their bodies moved through molasses." Throughout the 3-day battle, the humans revealed weapon after weapon that the Devourers had never encountered. Gravity bombs that created miniature black holes, quantum scramblers that randomized the target's atomic structure, dimensional razors that cut through space itself, but perhaps most terrifying, of all was the humans' complete unpredictability. They fought like no other species the Devourers had ever encountered, the creativity and viciousness that made adaptation impossible. As the last Devourer construct went dark, systems finally overwhelmed by weapons it could neither understand nor counter, Admiral Lee allowed himself a small smile. "Signaled the fleet," he ordered. "Threat neutralized. Begin search and rescue operations for any survivors." The galaxy's greatest nightmare had lasted less than 72 hours against humanity's fury. The silence that followed the battle was almost as unsettling as the fighting had been. Commander Taman Park stood on the observation deck of the Requiem's edge, watching human ships move through the debris field that had once been the most feared enemy in the galaxy. The Devourer constructs drifted like broken toys, their mechanical systems dark and lifeless. "Final casualty report," Captain Minesio Chang announced from her station. 14 ships reporting minor damage. 2 requiring shipyard repairs. 0 vessels lost. 0 personnel casualties. Admiral Jae-Sung Lee nodded as if he had expected. "Nothing less. Begin recovery operations. I want every survivor found and every piece of Devourer technology secured for analysis." Taman could hardly believe what he was hearing. An enemy that had consumed 1,000 civilizations over the course of history had been completely destroyed by a single human fleet in 3 days. And they had done it without losing a single person. "How?" he asked, turning to Captain Chang. "How did you make it look so easy?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching through the viewports as human medical ships approached the few remaining Zephyrian survivor pods. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of something deeper than victory. "Easy." "Her head, Commander. There was nothing easy about this. Every weapon we use today, every tactic we employed, was bought with the blood of our ancestors. Do you know what our world was like before we reached the stars?" Taman had read the reports, but hearing it from her was different. "Tell me. Imagine a planet where everything wants to kill you. Not just the predators, but the plants, the weather, the very air you breathe. Diseases that can wipe out entire populations. Natural disasters that happen without warning. And in the middle of all that, different groups of humans trying to kill each other over resources, territory, ideology." She gestured toward the tactical displays, where human ships were already beginning the work of rescue and reconstruction. "We survived because we learned to think like our enemies, to be more creative in killing than anything that wanted to kill us, to fight not just to win, but to make sure the threat never came back." Through the viewport, you could see the human medical ship Mercy's hand, carefully extracting Zephyrian survivors from the wreckage of their crystalline cities. The same species that had just unleashed devastating weapons was now working with infinite care to save lives. Dr. Yanesio Chang arrived on the bridge several hours later, her face showing a mixture of relief and confusion. She had been studying the recovered Devourer technology, trying to understand how the humans had defeated them so completely. "Admiral," she said, approaching Lee with obvious hesitation. "I've been analyzing the battlefield data. Some of the weapons your ships used. They don't match anything in our theoretical models. The reality anchors, the dimensional razors, the temporal distortion fields."
"How long have you been developing this technology?" Lee's expression didn't change.
"Since we first looked up at the stars and realized we weren't alone, we knew that eventually we would encounter something that wanted to destroy us. We prepared for that day. But the energy requirements alone should be impossible. The quantum mechanics involved are classified," Lee finished firmly. "What you saw today was necessary to end the threat. That's all you need to know." Dr. Chang looked like she wanted to argue, but something in the Admiral's tone made her reconsider. Instead, she turned to a different concern. "The other species are asking questions. They want to know what other capabilities humanity possesses. They're concerned." Admiral Lee almost smiled. "Good. They should be." The reconstruction of the Zephyrian colonies took 6 months. Human engineering teams worked alongside the survivors, their advanced technology making the impossible seem routine. Where the crystalline cities had once floated, new structures began to take shape. But these were different, protected by defense. systems that could detect and destroy any threat long before it reached the inhabited areas. Young Zephyrian Janae Park, one of the few survivors of the original attack, worked closely with the human teams. Her crystalline form had been damaged in the Devourer assault, but human medical technology had helped her heal in ways her own people thought impossible. "Why do you help us?" she asked Captain So Young Huang one day, as they watched the new cities taking shape. Could have simply destroyed the Devourers and left. Captain Huang paused in her work, considering the question. "Because that's what makes us different from them. The Devourers consumed, we protect. It's that simple. But you're so dangerous. The weapons you used, the way you fight. Other species are afraid of you now," Good Wang replied. "Fear keeps everyone honest, but more importantly, it keeps everyone alive." The new protocols established between humanity and the Galactic Confederation reflected this philosophy. Trade agreements were signed, cultural exchanges arranged, joint research projects initiated, but underlying it all was an understanding that had changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Humanity was no longer unknown quantity on the edge of civilized space. They were the apex predators, the species that other races called when the universe itself seemed to be ending. In the deepest archives of Confederation intelligence, a single file was created and sealed with the highest security classifications. It contained just one line: "Humanity's full military capability remains unknown. Recommend continued friendship at all costs." The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that chooses to protect rather than consume. And in the years that followed, when children of a dozen species looked up at the stars, they slept peacefully, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, human ships kept watch against the night. The Deathworlders had become the guardians, and the universe was safer for it.